Welcome to Real Talk, the show where we look at issues facing our youth. My name is Ome Kongo. I'm your host, and today we're going to talk about a Montgomery County resident right here in Bethesda who has started a program that is changing the world. Karen Nogues is a rising senior at the Cathedral School in Washington, D.C., and she has started a project called the Megabook Initiative, which is truly dynamic and something that I hope will be truly inspirational for other youth. Miss Karen Nogues, welcome to Real Talk.
Thank you.
I've read a lot about you. I've seen the work that you're doing, and when I talk to guests, the first thing I like to do is go beyond the bio.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing I'd like to ask is, who is Karen Nogues?
Well, I'm a rising senior at the National Cathedral School for Girls in D.C., and I've always loved children. Children have always fascinated me, whether it was playing with my younger cousins or babysitting, etc. I've always loved children. I saw my passion for reading as well transform. I think I combined those two passions, my love for children and my passion for reading. And this is how I started the Megabook Initiative, to increase children's access to books around the world.
Now, you wanted to increase children's access to books around the world because you've had this love of reading, but at what point did you start realizing that there was a disconnect as it relates to access to books that other children have across the globe? You're here in Montgomery County.
Exactly.
How did you develop this global awareness of what other children are dealing with?
I think, I've been fortunate enough to travel a lot. I've traveled to Ivory Coast, I've traveled to Togo, South Africa, I've been to China, France, and Germany as well. And I think it's through my travels and my experiences seeing younger children that I've been aware that in underprivileged areas of the world, children lack access to the same amount of books that we do in more privileged areas of the world. And I think it's through my experience as a child, I was always exposed to books. I was always surrounded with books. So I realized that it's so important to read when you're young. And I realized that it's not the same case for children in other areas of the world. Mm-hmm. And it's really through those travel experiences that I've become more aware.
So, Karen, you talk about your experiences overseas and traveling and developing this passion for reading and seeing people overseas not having a lot of books. But here you are living in Montgomery County, school in D.C., some of the top places for education across the country. And some people say here in America, your generation, your peers, don't really appreciate literacy, don't really appreciate reading. How do you feel when you go abroad and see the challenges young people have there, and then you come here and see what we're dealing with here? Or do you agree that your generation doesn't appreciate literacy?
I think it's definitely a dual problem. There's a problem of the limited access to books, and we see that a lot in developing countries across the globe. And we see in the U.S. and other developed countries, we see the problem where kids don't feel the incentive to read. And I think that this is growing into a bigger problem now as we're getting kids involved in there's other media, there's other forms of entertainment. And I think that we are seeing this problem emerge definitely more and more. So I feel the urgency in my cause when I see these two problems. I see that we really need to, we need to incentivize children to read, and we also need to make sure that we are providing them with more access to books, both in the U.S. and also abroad. But I think it's through creating incentives for kids to read, and it is through providing children with more access to books that we can address this issue.
I want to push back on that because,
yes, definitely.
Yes, I understand it's important to provide the incentive, but here I'm talking to somebody who apparently didn't need the incentive, right?
Well, you see, I think this is a problem because I was young and I was exposed to books. I lived in a house where I was surrounded with books, and I think where we see kids that don't have incentive to read, oftentimes there's a correlation when kids are not exposed to books when they're young. And when I say young, I mean really when they're growing up, when they're toddlers, when they're in their cribs. This is when we need to expose children to books. I think that once you get older and you're exposed to other media, if you grow up and you're just watching TV, for example, then I think we're definitely going to need to create more incentives to get these type of kids into reading as well, because there's a lot of children who are starting to fit into this category, who are not exposed to books when they're young, or they're not interested in reading when they're young, or they're simply not encouraged to read when they're young. And as a result, we need these kids to be reading as well, and so we need to create incentives so we can get a greater majority of kids reading.
So you're saying the 5-year-old with the Facebook page is probably a bad idea.
It's I think that we definitely need to make sure these kids are reading as well.
Now, overseas, do you feel like when you're dealing with these young students that you've seen, you talked about the lack of access, but do you feel like there's actually that desire, that incentive to want to learn? Because, Oprah says, when she built her school in South Africa, that there's a general greater appreciation for education in some of these other countries. Do you really feel like that's the case?
I do. I think that when I've been in my experience traveling to Africa, I've seen, and even with kids across the globe, I've seen that if you provide children with the book early on enough, they're going to be attracted to the book. They're going to be interested in the story. Because we all like hearing stories. I think this is a fact. I think this is common to human nature. We like hearing stories. And I think that if you expose children early on enough, the same would be true in Africa as it is here in the U.S.
And now, we're going to talk a little bit about the Megabooks initiative a little bit later, but do you feel like there's also an issue in the type of books that young students get exposed to overseas? Is it all about just hearing something read, or does the context of the books that they receive, does that matter as well?
I think there definitely is something to be said about this, because currently, while the standard is to distribute paper books, when we're donating paper books overseas, we tend to donate books that are out of context with children's environments. And when they're out of context and they don't seem relatable to children, it's harder to hook children on to reading. I think while the objective of reading is definitely to open children's minds and expand their imaginations, in order to hook young readers onto reading, we must provide them with books that are at least relevant to their life stories.
Now, is part of the problem also language? I mean, some of the countries that you've talked about visiting are, non-English speaking countries, and do you find the case that many of them are receiving just books that are, in English, for example, or from languages that they may not even speak?
There's that problem as well, and I think, and it's not only that, there's definitely the language barrier as well, and sometimes because we're providing them with books that are maybe in the common language of the country, but are not in the most popularly spoken language. We're getting books that it's not in the language that they're used to speaking. So there's definitely a language barrier problem as well.
And when we're dealing with this language barrier issue, do you feel like that can make children more eager to want to learn a language, or kind of just step back a little bit from the process?
I think definitely at first it's sometimes when kids are not exposed to books that don't seem relevant to them, it's easier for them to get turned off than turned on. And I think that's why I'm saying it's very important for us to first hook them on to books, at least get them interested in reading, and then we can definitely open them up to a larger collection of books.
And this is why you started the Megabooks initiative.
And this is really why. Okay. This is really the inspiration behind the Megabook initiative.
And tell us a little bit more about Megabooks. I mentioned it earlier, but I think it comes better from the source.
I think we started getting into it, and I think one story that I tell that I think illustrates the Megabook initiative. I'd like you to imagine a child in sub-Saharan Africa. The child has only a few books on our bookshelf, 2 of which are Welcome to Utah and Curious George. But unfortunately, the child does not understand the context of either of these books. I think it's this story that really inspired me to begin the Megabook initiative, because it's a story of children across the globe, and it's not of one child, but it's really many children, that maybe we're giving them donated books that are not in context with their stories. This is really why I started the Megabook initiative. We focus on the distribution of reading devices, because on a reading device, we can give a child a library of books, and we can select books based on their reading levels and interests.
And you're a rising senior. You're now. Yes. How old were you when you started this project?
Well, I started this project in 2011, so it'd be about 2 years ago. But it's been mainly securing partnerships, etc. We are now preparing for the launch of our pilot project in the fall.
And is this something that is locally based right here in Bethesda?
Yes, it is locally based. We have partners in Africa as well. We're partnered with Children for Africa, an organization based in Africa that has several branches focused on education, healthcare, and social sectors. And they're really focused on improving children's opportunities on the African continent. And so they're a great partner for our organization.
And when you also do a lot of work with partners on the ground, your main projects have been in Ivory Coast today?
My main projects will be we're starting our pilot project in Ivory Coast. We hope to quickly expand throughout Africa. and beyond.
And what does the pilot project look like? Is it working with a school or a community center or church?
It's focused with the school. It's based in a school, and that's just because the organizational structure will allow for a smoother device distribution. So we're based in a school for our pilot project.
And when you talk about devices, are we saying like iPads? Are we talking, other Nooks or other types of, more specific type of?
So we're talking about we're open to many reading devices, but specifically it has to be a device. First of all, it has to be simply for reading, because of the problem we get into iPads and other type tablets. There's too many distractions on the devices, and we can easily distract ourselves from the purpose of reading. And so we're talking about really the simple e-readers. In addition to the device, we're hoping for a device that has this e-ink display technology.
E-ink
display technology. And the reason we're specific about this is because when you read from a display like this, it's not tiring on your eyes. And so it's not necessarily the technological aspect. It's more that we want to make sure we're providing children with a device that encourages them to read and where they're not tired just from reading on the device.
And are there any issues relating to powering device as relates to, outlets? Are they going to need, chargers?
One of the advantages of the e-ink display is that it can stay charged for about 3 to 4 weeks.
Wow.
Exactly. When you use an LCD display, we're talking about maybe every 2 days. And so there's definitely an advantage that comes with charging the devices as well.
And what grade or age range are you looking at starting? If it's going to be more elementary school level?
It will definitely be more elementary school, and this is because the love of reading really begins and develops at the earliest ages. We talk about how it's important to hook children on early into reading, and so we're focusing on children maybe ranging in age from 7 to 11 years old.
7 to 11, okay.
Where they know how to read, where now the focus is more on providing them with access to a larger book collection.
And does Megabooks, are you all going to be picking the books or creating the books or working with the partners on the ground?
So we're working with, the book selection is really, it's with the teachers. We're working closely with teachers in terms of determining that the book selection is appropriate to children's reading levels and also their interests.
Yeah. I think that this is really fascinating because I feel like even within America, I mean, there could be a need for, certain types of Megabooks initiatives here. I find myself wondering, because I've never heard of a project quite as dynamic or interesting as this. I find myself wondering, and I would like to get your thoughts on this, but, why do you feel like programs like this that introduce, this type of e-reader concept where they're in areas where there may not be access to books. Even here we have that problem. Why do you feel, or do you feel like there's not a greater effort to reach out to young people in America to get them interested in different ways of reading?
I think there definitely is that, and while the pilot project is based in Ivory Coast, I definitely would see the Megabook initiative expanding to the U.S. as well. We began in Ivory Coast where the problem is really simply limited access to books. In the U.S., the problem becomes also, and also many other countries, the problem becomes one from just simply limited access to one where we also must consider incentives for reading.
Right.
So it becomes more of a dual issue. But I definitely would see the Megabook initiative expanding to the U.S.
Now, for you, I mean, as you finish school, is this your plan to immerse yourself in this full time? Are you going to spend, is college on the horizon, or are you going to spend most of your time doing this project and getting it implemented across the globe?
I think that I definitely would. I would see myself taking some time off definitely to advance this project. And so I'm not sure exactly about final plans for now, but I definitely would continue working on this and seeing how we can expand, because I see that there is a demand. There is a demand for books across the globe. And I think it's important that we realize how the current generation of readers, as Margaret Feller once said, today a reader, tomorrow a leader. And so I think it's important that this mission is definitely one that is important. It's important that we expose children to books so that we can give them the skills, equip them with the skills needed to become our next leaders.
Today a reader,
tomorrow a leader.
And who was that?
This is Margaret Fuller.
That's a beautiful quotation. And so as you work into that, as you go into this senior year, are you getting other people in your school involved in this project, or in your neighborhood in
Yes.
Bethesda? Or?
Mm-hmm. I'm a member at my school of the Student Library Advisory Board, and so with in correspondence with them, I'm actually leading the community service efforts for literacy-related initiatives in the DC area for our school. And so really in correspondence with the Student Library Board, I'll definitely be working on this project as well.
So you're very excited about it.
I'm definitely I'm very excited, yes.
Yeah. I think that this initiative is very powerful. And I really feel like, you as a student, are really leading the way with this. If there's one word that you would use to describe your desire for children to take themselves to the next level, what would be that one word?
That's a good question. I would say definitely courage or inspiration, because it's by reading that children expand their imaginations. And so I really want children to develop and expand their imaginations, because I realize that when children are exposed to books, they think of incredible ideas. And these are the children that will really become our next leaders.
Excellent. Well, you give great points, and there's so much more I want to talk to you about.
Yes.
We'll get right after the break.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with more Real Talk.
Separate raw meats from other foods by using different cutting boards. 3,000 Americans will die from food poisoning this year. Keep your family safer. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov.
Welcome back to Real Talk, the show where we look at issues facing our youth. We've been talking with Karen Noguez, founder of the Megabooks initiative. And Karen, I've been learning so much about this initiative. It's so dynamic, but I have to say that I'm fascinated by your age and what it is that you're doing with such a expansive project. I recently learned also by looking at your bio that you are a global teen leader. What is a global teen leader?
Global teen leaders are a group of youth selected by the We Are Family Foundation for their commitment and dedication to projects that promote social change. This year, in 2013, there was about 30 global teen leaders that were selected for their dedication to social projects. And these are teen leaders selected across the globe.
And one of the things that I've learned as it relates to global teen leaders is that, yes, you come from across the globe, and you do these programs where you learn, but you also are given a mentor to help you on your project. Talk to us about the mentorship aspect of what GTLs do.
The mentorship aspect is really great, and it's definitely a central part of the program. Every GTL, every global teen leader, is paired with a mentor who assists them in carrying out their project, carrying out their mission throughout the duration of the year. I was fortunate to be paired with Betsy Miller, my mentor, who works in private equity. Okay. She's based in New York, and she's also she's always been interested in books, and so she decided to work with the Megabook initiative so we could advance this mission.
That's beautiful. And has this been helpful to you? I mean, we live in a world where so many young people have this mentality of you can't tell me nothing. I can figure it out all on my own. Do you feel like in actually working with a mentor that this is something that is helping you take your organization to the next level?
I definitely do, and I think it's because the mentor is very good. We speak regularly, and it helps us to keep focused. It helps us to keep a sense of direction for the project. I think that when you're working by yourself, it's easier to think small picture. It's easier to think about all the little details that need to be accomplished. But when you work with a mentor, you're able to step back and see the big picture and see the next steps that will really allow you to take bigger steps towards achieving your goal.
Do you feel like every young person could benefit from having a mentor?
I definitely believe every young person could benefit from having a mentor, whether it's through advancing a project or even offering advice. It really allows you to expand your mind to think even bigger picture about the projects you're working with.
And being involved in a project like Global Teen Leaders, has that also expanded? Because you said other students have different projects that they're working on. Has that expanded your ideas in terms of what's possible for you and your organization.
Definitely. The Global Teen Leaders United at a conference in New York, the 3-Dash conference, hosted from March 9th to 15th. This conference, at the conference, I had the opportunity of meeting global teen leaders, such as there was Jack, who was developing a paper sensor for detecting cancer. I met Adora Civitak, who has conferences for youth in her hometown, Redmond, TEDx Redmond. I met Jake, who has raised over $1.4 million for diabetes research.
Wow.
And the list goes on. These are incredible youth. And I think even by meeting with these youth, we felt a sense of unity because the unity comes because we feel like we're all united from the sense of purpose. We feel committed to promoting social change. And so there's a sense of unity that we found at this conference.
And what you're saying is great, but for me, it's also a little bit kind of sad because I hear so much negativity about young people nowadays. And here you are talking about not only your project, but 30 other leaders, this program that's been going on that are changing the world. Do y'all even think about what adults think about you all in terms of the bad rap so many youth get? Does it bother you, or are you all just so focused moving forward that none of you don't pay us any mind? How do you feel about that?
I think we've all definitely been faced with experiences where we're not necessarily. There's definitely been experiences where people have not necessarily always encouraged us, or we've heard definitely a mix of both sides. But I think that it's our commitment to our projects that really leads us forward. It's seeing the children in Africa, and seeing the children in underprivileged areas of the world that are lacking access to books that motivates me. So it's really thinking in terms of what my focus is, what my mission is for this project that motivates me and allows me to move forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that makes perfect sense as the way you explain it.
Exactly.
I'm also assuming that in order to do a project like this, parental support is extremely important. Can you talk about that and having that parental support, if it's helped you or if there's been a lack thereof that it has motivated you more? How has that worked for you?
Well, I've been very lucky. My parents have been very, very supportive of my project from the beginning. They've really been supportive. And I think it's that allows me, whether it's through driving me to different meetings, etc. It's just they've been incredibly supportive. And I think that it's the support they give me that allows me to, also as a sounding board for new ideas, it really allows me to remain focused on my project and to remain dedicated to it.
Now, what would you say to parents who, particularly I know for myself, even coming from parents who come from an immigrant background, sometimes there's a philosophy of what somebody needs to do. You need to focus on this in school. You need to become that. And I know it's also the case for a lot of American-born children as well who are told they need to focus on a career. But it seems like your parents have supported you in what your passion is. What advice would you give to parents out there who may be watching as it relates to supporting their kids in what the kids actually want to do?
I really do think that we all have a gift. We all have a passion. And it's really up to us to find that passion or gift. And I think it's up to parents to support children's gift or passion. Because I believe that when we develop those gifts, when we develop those talents, we really contribute most to society. And so I think it's up to parents to encourage their children to find that gift. And
do you feel like many of the students that you may encounter, whether it's here, whether it's abroad, here through your literacy initiatives that you do here, do you feel like many students that you encounter feel like they don't really have a sense of support, be it from parents or just the community in general as it relates to the things that they want to do?
There's definitely a mix, but I think one of the focuses actually for the Megabook initiative is this dual. We need to have the support of the parents as well, because I think it's definitely a true saying that if you need your parents' support in order to remain dedicated to your project, remain dedicated to what you're doing. I think even in the U.S., for example, when I was a child, I was surrounded with books, and my parents were reading these stories. It's receiving the support from parents is really that contact, that interaction between children and parents that allows the children to be motivated. So one of the focuses of the Megabook initiative is to gain that parental support, so kids will feel even more motivated to read. And so it's really, I think it's important that we place this emphasis on receiving parental support.
So that parental support, that it seems like that's universal. Doesn't matter if you're in the
it's
U.S.,
universal.
Ivory Coast.
It really does not matter. I think the problem remains the same whether you're in the U.S., Ivory Coast, or in any country. It's important that you receive your parents' support so you can really advance and do your best with your.
Do you feel like nowadays, 2013 going into 2014, that there's really no excuse to learning how to read? I mean, people say that, well, I don't have time, but then, you can learn how to read things through the internet. There's so many free resources at the library that people can get access to. And I don't even know if people know how to use libraries anymore. I mean, do you feel like nowadays there's no excuse for not really learning how to be a reader?
I think I definitely would say there probably is no excuse in that sense because we do have the materials available. But where the problem becomes ambiguous is when we're not emphasizing the importance of reading. And so I think that it is really in our hands to re-emphasize the importance of reading. Yeah. So that we can get children to also understand its importance.
And through your literacy initiatives with your school and the other projects that you're doing, as relates to stateside, are you seeing improvements as it relates to some of the goals of the projects that you all are working on and increasing access to reading and books in this area as well?
I think so. It's really in providing children, even in reading, just simply reading to kids. You see that kids easily get connected with the story. And so I think it's even in that individual attention that we're giving to children that we're definitely seeing progress. And it's small steps, but it does add up, and it really makes a difference in children's lives.
As the Megabooks initiative continues to grow, what is your grand vision? Is it a Megabooks initiative in every country, every continent, world domination as it relates to the growth of young people reading, or is it more segmented and limited in terms of where you want to go with it?
I see the problem of reading. I see the limited access to books, and I see the lack of incentive to reading. And I really see this as a universal problem. And so while my pilot project is based in Ivory Coast, I hope to expand the Megabook initiative to other continents, to other countries, because it's important that we work in correlation, really in correspondence with parents, teachers, and government leaders, that we re-emphasize the importance of reading. Because once we do re-emphasize the importance of reading, it'll be easier to encourage children to read. And I think through this, the Megabook initiative will play a role.
So you feel like it's an all hands on deck
It's definitely
approach.
all hands on. The Megabook initiative is a small part of it. It's a small piece, but if we can get the support we need from parents, teachers, and government leaders, I believe that this problem can be addressed.
And if I hope that a lot of people out there are finding interest in this. Where can people go if they want to get more information?
Definitely. Please go to our website, www.megabookinitiative.org. We have more information posted on our pilot project, our work, and additional information about our work, our project. So.
Oh, Karen, I wish you the best of luck in everything that you're doing, and I want more people across the globe to get involved in your projects to get people reading. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That's going to do it for another episode of Real Talk. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at realtalk@omekongo.com. And remember, our youth are 50% of our population, but 100% of our future. Let's make sure we're taking care of them. See you next time.